Hi everyone. I just wanted to share my experience of using public transport. So I used to be quite reluctant to use buses and trains. I was a bit nervous about it, and I usually just chose to use the car. But my husband gets car sick, so I started using public transport again shortly after meeting him. It's definitely given me more options, as I don't need to worry about a parking space for my big van. And I can go out even when I don't have a driver, which is a big thing for me. So it's a great option for traveling around London. So I just wanted to show you what it's like to use the bus. So I live close to the bus stop, so it's just a short walk. When I'm waiting for the bus, I try to make myself very visible for the driver. Some bus stops have multiple buses that stop there, so if it's not the bus number that I'm waiting for, I usually turn away from the road so they know I don't want that one. So in the bus, I usually use the ramp as at the front, so I drive up to the door so the driver can see me, and then back up to give them space to deploy the ramp. The wheelchair space isn't huge, so it takes a bit of maneuvering, but my wheelchair is quite large and I manage okay. It's a little bit harder to get off, but just have to usually move a little bit just before we get there to get ready to move. It's slightly different with the London buses because the buses have electric ramps that deploy at the side of the bus. On the outside of the bus, there's a blue button that you can press to the side of the door outside, but in my experience, that doesn't always work. So I usually ask someone to alert the driver that I need the ramp. But if you're on your own and you're worried about asking someone else to help, you can always go to the front door first just to let the driver know that you need the ramp. When getting off the bus, there's usually a blue button next to the wheelchair space, which tells the driver you want to get off at the next stop. And that's different from the buttons next to the other seats for other people to press. And in the buses I use, those are red, and the one that I need to press is blue, and it's got a wheelchair symbol on it. So it makes a different sound to the other button, so it tells the driver that you need the ramp. Sometimes it's quite loud on the bus, so the driver won't always hear. So again, you might need to ask someone to tell the driver. Sometimes I panic and think the driver hasn't heard me and is about to drive off, but actually what they're doing is they open the door first to let passengers off. Then they close the door in order to deploy the map and open the door again. So it takes a little bit longer. If I'm doing a new route on the bus, I'll usually use Google just to get directions using public transport. It's got a public transport option instead of a car, and that should usually tell me the bus number and bus stop that I need, and how many stops before I get off. But in London, this can be really confusing because you could get several bus stops like right next to each other, each with a different code and different bus numbers stopping there. So Google really helps with making sure you're on the right one. I have a bus pass which allows free bus travel for me at one PA. Different areas have different policies on PAs and carers, but my bus pass gives me free bus travel anywhere in England. So it's one bus to the station from my flat, and then I can get a train into London. So currently the best trains to get are the high-speed GWR trains that take you to London Paddington, but you do need a ramp to get on this train. So ideally, if you know exactly when you're traveling, it can help to book assistance beforehand. This means they should be expecting you at the station in order to provide you with a ramp. However, booked assistance is notoriously unreliable. I used to book assistance a lot, and then no one was expecting me. But you have to know exactly when you're traveling as well. In Reading, where I live, the fast trains to London are about one every 10 minutes. So I don't always know which one I'll get. I usually just turn up at the station and ask for a ramp. Sometimes they complain that I should have booked, but they always provide the ramp. And there's always someone on the platform, and I'm happy to wait like an extra 10 minutes if they don't want to get me on immediately, just so that they're not rushing. And when you get to your destination station, usually the staff member has called ahead to let your station know where you're getting off, or that you need a ramp. London Paddington always used to be a nightmare as they were never expecting me. But several people complained, including me, and I met with the station manager at one point, and they've since brought in improvements. The last few times it's worked really well, so it can definitely pay to complain. In London, you can also use the underground to get around. Access on the underground has improved in recent years. There are many routes that you can now do in a wheelchair, and it makes things easier. But you have to know which stations to use. My husband maintains a map at stepfreelondon.uk, which has the most up-to-date and detailed listing of accessibility on the London Underground. So this tells me where I can go. This train is on the Victoria line at Vauxhall. The Victoria line is definitely my favourite line because the step and gap between the train and platform is really small. Not all accessible stations are like that. Sometimes there's a bit of a bump. Although my wheelchair always seems to manage better than I think it will when I look at a gap. Some underground stations require ramps, so you need to find a member of staff to help you make the journey. They're usually very helpful on the underground, but it does take a little bit longer to travel. It's really great being able to drive on and off the train without a ramp, and that's called level boarding, and that's something Pathfinders is campaigning for at the moment. In the future in London, Crossrail will allow some level boarding in the centre of London, which will make it easier to get around. So as regards for staff in buses and trains, I think staff are usually just doing their job and they want passengers to have a good journey experience. Most of them are friendly, but sometimes they can be rude. You can report this if you need to the operating companies. I would say don't accept abuse if you receive it. As I said, complaining can pay off sometimes. So yeah, those are my tips for using public transport. And yeah, thanks to Mitch for inviting me to present.